I'm back for part 2 of my Back to School sleep series. Last week in episode 147, I shared sleep tips for kiddos heading to preschool and toddlers heading to daycare for the first time. Today is all about sleep for the elementary age children. Hi, I'm Allison Egidi, a pediatric sleep and wellness coach and a mom of 2. I love to help parents find solutions. This is How Long Till Bedtime. As kids get older, it becomes even more common for summer sleep schedules to look different than school year sleep schedules. This can leave parents feeling very ready to get back to the structure a school year brings, but also anxious about shifting their children to a school year appropriate sleep schedule. Elementary age children often have an early start. In my house, we shoot to be at the door around 7:20 in the morning. But there are many kids in our area who actually need to be on their bus before 7 a.m. This means a lot of these elementary age school children, including mine, are going to need to be out the door before they are currently waking up over the summer. Today, I'm going to share some tips for figuring out your child's ideal sleep schedule during the school year and figuring out how much sleep is ideal for them. But first, I want to share why I think you should care as much about planning your child's sleep schedule as you do about doing all of that fun back-to-school shopping. A couple of years ago, the American Academy of Pediatrics published the results of a study related to sleep duration and kindergarten adjustment. The objective was to examine linkages between children's sleep duration and children's socio-emotional, learning engagement, executive functioning, and academic outcomes across the full kindergarten year. The study, which included 221 children, showed that regularity of nighttime sleep in which children slept 10 or more hours per night, especially during pre-K, consistently predicted more favorable kindergarten outcomes in all of those areas I mentioned: socio-emotional, learning engagement, and academic domains. The results suggested that establishing healthy nighttime sleep habits before kindergarten started was especially promotive of better kindergarten adjustment across the entire kindergarten year. This is just one example of a study reminding us that sleep plays an important role in our children's school experience. Time and again, these studies have demonstrated that sleep helps children prepare to learn and retain what they learn. Sleep also helps with emotional regulation and impulse control, what we think of as classroom behavior and how children engage with their friends at school. We also know that sleep helps with anxiety and mental health, which of course can help our youngest elementary age children with smoother drop-offs and general confidence around being at school without their parents. And it helps our older elementary age children navigate more challenging social and academic situations at school. While there are many children who have ADD or ADHD and benefit greatly from treatment, I think it's important to point out that it's also not uncommon for children to be misdiagnosed with ADD or ADHD when they are actually sleep deprived, which has negatively impacted the ability to focus and to regulate the impulse control. And so they have very similar symptoms. I have worked with many parents who are receiving calls from school about their children's poor classroom behavior and possible indicators of ADD or ADHD. And after we worked on their child's sleep hygiene and nailed down their optimal amount of sleep, their behavior improved dramatically. So if your child starts to struggle with their behavior at school, I always suggest that you at least look at the sleep piece. And as a parent who has one child who just finished elementary school last year and one who is entering 4th grade, I can tell you that sleep has played a huge role in my children's academic success. In episode 128, I share what happened when I decided to start taking my girls to the evening men's and women's UVA basketball games last season. It was an unplanned experiment that I'm glad we went through because it proved what I suspected, and that was that sleep was playing a role in my daughter's grades. If you haven't listened to that story, check out episode 128 when you're done with this episode. As you can tell, I have strong feelings about the role sleep can play in children's school success, and the studies back that up. So how do you actually prepare to adjust your child's sleep, and how do you figure out how much sleep is ideal for your child? The Academy of Pediatrics recommends 9 to 12 hours of sleep for grade school age children. This is a huge range. So I'm going to go ahead and say it's not even overly helpful. If, for example, you're someone, just let's take us as adults, someone who thrives with 7 hours of nighttime sleep, if you're going to get just 4 hours of sleep, you're not going to be your best self. So imagine if you're a child who would thrive with 12 hours and you're only getting 9. So I'm going to break this down a little bit more with the amount of sleep that I find children tend to thrive with. I like to see 5 through 7-year-olds getting 10.5 to 12 hours of sleep at night. And I think most kids in this age range are actually going to thrive and be their absolute best self when they're in that 11 to 12 hour range during the school year in particular. I would say this really rings true for kindergartners who may be taking on a more structured learning for the majority of a school day for the very first time. Even kids who have been in daycare their whole childhood often are exhausted as they transition into kindergarten because there's a lot more structure, both on the expectations of how they behave and on the expectations of learning. Once we're in the 8 to 10-year-old group, you may start to see a little reduction in sleep needs, but typically not as much as people think. For example, my 10-year-old can still easily sleep 11 hours. She can, of course, get by on less, and she does sometimes. But as I talked about in episode 128, she thrives academically and socially and with the least amount of stress when she's hitting 11 hours as often as possible. So for her during the school year, that means a 7:30, 7:45 bedtime is ideal. Of course, we don't always hit that because there are sports and there's homework, but the goal is to hit that timing as many nights as possible. Now, the shift many parents will start to experience towards the end of elementary school is the early puberty circadian rhythm shift. As children go through puberty, their sleep rhythm does start to shift, which means their strongest pull to sleep, I'm talking about that ideal bedtime, will shift to a later time. For example, in 5th grade, my older daughter's ideal bedtime shifted slowly, but ultimately all the way out to about 8:45, 9 p.m. Now, the struggle there is that her natural morning wake time also shifted. For those of you who've been around for a while, you know she was my early riser. Well, just now she slept until 8:20. She still really thrives with 10 to 10.5 hours of sleep at night, and with needing to be out the door around 7:20 a.m., that meant that last school year, I often had to wake her up in the morning. This is not ideal. But her shifted rhythm plus her after-school sports and schoolwork made it very challenging to have her get to sleep much earlier. But we did the best we could, balancing when she would have that natural pull to sleep, when she was tired enough to go to bed earlier, and getting all the things done. But if you have a child who has not yet shown any signs of puberty and you're having to wake them in the morning to go to school, I would say this is going to be your number one indicator that they could benefit from more sleep. It is really ideal that your child is able to wake on their own in the morning. If you're listening and school hasn't started yet, so you're not feeling confident about the exact number of hours of sleep that is optimal for your child, In the 3 to 5 days leading up to the first day of school, I recommend you start waking them within about 30 minutes of the time that they would need to be up to get ready for school, and then start to see what their behavior is like during the day, and at the same time, start to shift their bedtime to an earlier hour. If you have a 5 to 7-year-old, I always encourage parents to start in that 7:30 p.m. bedtime window. And frankly, I like that window for most kids until they start to show signs of puberty. For those of you with an early riser who wakes up at the same early time each morning, whether they go to bed at 7 p.m. or 10 p.m., just go ahead and start shifting the bedtime to that 7:30 window in the 3 to 5 to 7 days before school starts, and see if you can just help your child get more sleep so they're going into the school year at the top of their game. And if any of you notice in those first couple of weeks of school that your child is clearly exhausted or you're starting to receive reports of poor behavior, do not hesitate to test out a bedtime as early as 6:30. Sometimes an extra early rescue bedtime can help children quickly reset their bodies and brains to adjust to the new school year expectations. Until my girls were about 8 years old, it was not uncommon for me to throw in a 6:30 bedtime whenever I noticed that the wheels were starting to come off. They would then get 12 hours of sleep and things almost immediately started to improve. Being well rested will help your child and you adjust to the start of the new school year. Getting the proper amount of sleep will also help your child show up to school with a brain that is ready to take in and retain new information. And it will make it easier for your child to behave well, listen well, perform well, and just generally enjoy school socially. Thanks for joining me again today. If you have friends who have been chatting about needing to shift their child's sleep schedule before school, please share this episode with them. I hope you and your family have had an amazing summer and that there is a great school year ahead for all of you. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to How Long Till Bedtime. To learn how we can work together to improve your child's sleep, please visit sleepandwellnesscoach.com.